What I want to say is that the Moko Jumbi, I'm new to Moko Jumbi, but Moko Jumbi is not new to me because I grew up in the Caribbean and I've seen people walk on stilts all my life. And we have a character called Mother Sally, which is another character that I have used before. So what all of that represents is Africa. And being from the Caribbean, that carries with it a lot of weight because we were stolen from Africa and we don't have that direct connection. So that makes those kinds of things more important in a way to reconnect to a lost past. So when I see those characters, they're that much more powerful. So that's what I mean, that I might be new to it in that I only started walking on stilts for a few months now, but it's not new to me. It's something that I have, that's always been a part, that's always been there, kind of like underneath the surface. And I've always wanted to do art. I've always seen myself as an artist. And that theme, that underlying theme of am I Caribbean or am I African, and what's the difference and what does that mean and does it matter, has always been in my work. So I've been trying to explore all these different ideas, and one thing that I've come to that kind of pulls them together, and the reason why I'm so excited is because Moko Jumbi just somehow ties all these different ideas together. So one place that we can see, if you trace my work through the ages, is the idea of art on the streets, art happening on the street, and what it means to be modern, new, cutting edge. Of course, every young artist is trying to catch that new thing. So that's one of the places where we see, that's one of the places where that connection happens. And every person from the Caribbean loves Carnival for that, playing mass on the street, out on the street. But why is that important? Why does that feel so real and so fresh every time, right? To me, that's something I like to call perpetual art. It's not a new idea, right? When we look at African art, we see the people coming out onto the street, doing the dancing and doing the movement, and we can understand that renewal that happens in that moment. And I think that's what Carnival does over and over again. And it's up to us, the young people, to keep reigniting that power and that energy into it, into that movement, and into that motion, into that art that's happening out in the street every time. There's still something that's happening which we can relate back to this idea of Carnival, because it hit me one day. I was just sitting on the street waiting on my son to do his football class, thinking, what am I going to paint? And I started to look around and I started to see motion and pattern and movement happening all around me. And I said, this is African art. You look around and you can see pattern in everything around you. The trees, the windows, the bicycles, the cars, the streets, the zebra crossing, the chairs lined up next to the tables, and you can understand what it is that the original African artists were trying to do. And that's why their ideas and their vision of art is still so modern even today, because they understood something about that pattern and motion is modernity, right? It doesn't ever get old. So I sat there and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that this is what I want to paint. I want to paint this pattern that's happening right in front of my eyes. Even in a place like Shanghai, I could see that vitality happening right there in that space. And then what happens with Carnival is that we all can participate all at once in that vitality, right? So even though we don't necessarily experience Carnival in the same way in China that we do in the Caribbean, there's still something that's happening, because each man is coming out of his home and he has his routine where he comes out of his rectangular home with the pattern, and he gets into his car with the four wheels, or he walks the same path and he goes to the bus with the windows, and we can see that pattern of his life literally playing out every day. And then that's one man, and then you put him next to the next man, and you put him next to the next man, and you can see that pattern happening. And that's the modern city, right? Because everything has its place and everything is in motion. So thinking about that, and then thinking about this idea of modernity and how that links us back to some kind of an original idea of man and of modernization, which I think African art represents. And then for me, Moko Jumbies is that spirit that can link that past to that future, or that past to that present. Because if you think about it, every day we're on our route, doing our thing, following our patterns of our daily lives. If you could be like a master computer or something, and you could use everybody's step to map out what they're going to do the next day, maybe we could even predict our futures in that way. And what's more modern than that, right? Being able to tell what each man is, the step that you're going to make even before you make it. And so thinking about modernity in that way, I see the Moko Jumbies as the spirit that can kind of encapsulate this idea of modernity. And it's more than that too, because when you walk on stilts, you are immediately elevated. And that sounds inspirational just by itself. But the experience of being elevated can be so terrifying, because you're afraid with every step. You don't have that sureness of foot that when you step, you're gonna be okay. So each step could be really scary. So then the person who's walking on stick has to say, no, I'm not gonna fall each time. I'm not gonna fall. This is gonna remain an inspiration, aspirational. This is gonna remain positive, right? So when you're walking on stilts, it really does hover. The Moko Jumbies really does hover in that space between exhilaration and trepidation, where every time you stand up, especially for the first time, it could be exhilaration. It could be the most fun, exciting moment of your life, or at any minute you could fall and it could be very painful. You could break something, right? So he hovers in that space between there. And what's the difference between the man that succeeds and the man that fails? The one that is not afraid to take that step every time to take that step, despite the fact that he might fall. So that's the what can I say? The teachings of the stick. Like I I might play with my son and say, I'm gonna teach you the way of the stick. Those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about at that moment, because we have to find that courage to keep going no matter what. No matter how scary it is, we gotta find that to take the next step, to go even higher, to get to the next level. And that's what we're trying to do. So when I first learned Stilt-walking, it was together with my son, and we experienced it together. We had our first lesson together. It's a challenge for us together. He's much better at it than me because he's not afraid. He's less afraid than I to fall. I'm an older person and I have much more to lose, or maybe I'm thinking too much. But so it's something that we share in that way, and he pushes me to be more brave, and it's something that we can experience together. We can play together. We can, and it's so much more fun, having two than just one. And we really are the only Moko Jumbii in all of China. All these millions of people, they do place on stilts, but it's not the same. So that's amazing to me, the idea that we are what we're representing and what we can bring with this spirit of the Moko Jumbii, and really helping the Chinese people to see again something that they're familiar with from their childhood, but to see it again in this renewed spirit, which is exactly the same spirit that I'm talking about: renewal, revitalization, aspirational, going higher and higher and higher. And really, what's the highest heights that we can reach? That's Moko Jumbii.